Whether it's income assistance, disability support, employment support, or housing and homelessness, digital inclusion has a major impact on the priorities and responsibilities of the Department of Community Services. In this hour, we'll turn the spotlight on the department to learn more about their perspective on digital inclusion. We'll talk about some of the great work we're doing together, some of the impact that is having, and we'll see what else we can learn about the department's priorities going forward. Now, let's meet our special guest for this session. If you saw the agenda for today prior to yesterday, you would have seen Community Services Minister Brendan Maguire was planning to join us. Unfortunately, Minister Maguire is sick and cannot make it. We all hope he feels better very soon, and in the meantime, we're delighted to have Cynthia Carroll, the Associate Deputy Minister for the Department of Community Services, joining us. Cynthia, welcome to GEO Forum 2024.
Oh, well, thanks for having me.
It's really great to have you. You've been at the department not very long.
I think this is my 5th month.
Excellent. And are you just being thrown right into it to stand in for the minister?
I am no stand-in for the minister, but I will do my best.
Well, we really, really appreciate it, and it's great to see you again.
It's nice to see you.
So let's start by helping everyone at home or in the audience understand a bit more about the Department of Community Services and what you do. What can you tell us about what the department's responsible for?
Yeah, so the Department of Community Services offers a broad range of social services and support. And really, the goal is to foster well-being and social security among individuals and families living across the province. Yeah, and so, within that umbrella, there are a number of programs and services, including income assistance. We manage child and family well-being, housing support, homelessness diversion, and the disability support program.
Yeah, it sounds like you're working with a lot of different Nova Scotians who are all trying to cope with some significant challenges.
Yeah. So, when you look at things like income assistance, it's really important that individuals and families are receiving the necessary support, like to have the basic standard of living, the protection of children and families, building that capacity within community. And, there's a lot of work right now across the province with supporting persons with disabilities and a lot of work happening there. And as well as, employment support and supporting people who are working to get back to work and attachment to the labor market.
Sure. So people living with disabilities, people maybe struggling with their housing situation, people needing employment support, long-standing challenges that have kind of always been around in somebody's life, but maybe the way they're being addressed or how they're being supported is changing.
Yeah, this is really important work, and it's really exciting to see how the department is really working hard and evolving and using digital strategies and some technology to kind of help make a lot of those supports and services more accessible. So yeah, it's great to be here to talk about some of that today.
Yeah, it's an exciting time. So before you were with the Department of Community Services, many people will recognize you as the Executive Director of Autism Nova Scotia.
Yes.
You were one of the first stops that my family made when we moved back here to town, because our family is filled with autistic kids at the time, and you were over in Halifax. I think you had a staff of 3 or 4 at the time.
Yes.
It's certainly changed quite a bit since you left just recently. What's it been like to be, in that sector, in a really growing, autism research, autism support, autism services had its own big growth trajectory. I think the last time we spoke, 150 or 180 people in part of the Autism Nova Scotia family. What's it like being in that space and now being where you are? What do you see? What are the differences? What's that like?
Yeah, so I think anyone who works in not-for-profit, in the community really has a high public service motivation. And so you see that transference when you move into the public sector as well. And really it's like looking at what are the needs of those citizens, right? So when I was in community and worked at Autism Nova Scotia, really looking at supporting the autism community, but very passionate about the disability community as a whole as well, and looking at equitable access to services, looking at how do we make support programs more accessible. And when you look at the geographical spread of Nova Scotia, and things like transportation and access, right? Those were all really key drivers in growth, right? And transitioning into the public service, a lot of those are very similar, right? So, how do we get the programs that are offered, in this case by the Department of Community Services, how do they reach the people that need to be reached? And how do we make them accessible and easy, right? So that people will be able to participate, right? Because really it's about well-being and quality of life and, and I think that those are really kind of nice synergies. And I think, one of the things that I've had the fortune of even before my time with Autism Nova Scotia, which most people remember me for, but I actually worked in the child and youth care sector in my early career and had the opportunity to work quite closely with community services. So kind of coming back to community services at this level in my career, but also with the evolution of the department, has been really exciting because to be able to see the transformation of where they were as well, say 20 years ago versus where we are today, it's really quite transformative and very, very different, especially in the way that they're talking about like digital strategies and how to make information and programs and support more accessible for all citizens.
Yeah, it really did feel like, over the last easily the 5 or 10 years that the department has really put a lot of attention on kind of, transforming their own approach and how they engage with people, and really a lot more person-centric approach, I would say, right? A lot more dignity is being injected into an old and not necessarily friendly system historically. And then digitally, though, we've really hit an accelerant now.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, we know the pandemic was hard on a lot of us, and certainly for more vulnerable citizens, I think, across the province. But, I can remember in community, even in a not-for-profit, having a digital strategy, but really not struggling, but it's definitely more complex in rural regions, right, to kind of embrace that. And I think if there was a silver lining of the pandemic, right, I think it really did catapult the benefits of technology and advancing digital strategies to ensure that people weren't isolated, right? So how do you break down that isolation and some of the complexities that exist, right, around even transportation and housing and, digital strategy can kind of bridge a lot of those other gaps or while things are kind of in progress and moving and working. And so I think, the pandemic helped us there and really accelerated us, whether we were ready or not. But I think there's a different level of embracing around understanding that, digital technology and how we support citizens in Nova Scotia, is a really effective tool.
Yeah, our experience certainly has been that it is an incredible enabler.
Yeah.
And, we talk about people living with disabilities, which is an incredibly diverse population unto itself, right? But whether they're affecting your ability to get around or, work in different scenarios, technology is providing all kinds of opportunities for folks as well. And you mentioned, geography and transportation. In Nova Scotia, if you're not right in one of the cities, you're often an hour or more from anything.
That's right.
You may be caring for someone at home. It could be someone else in your family with disabilities. It could be an elderly person. It could be kids. There's so many things that will tie us to where we are that stop us from getting to where we need to be, and digital is breaking those down. Yeah,
for sure. And I think, we always have, more to go, further to go, more to learn, and we have generational gaps, right, in how we learn technology, and definitely some people are more savvy at it than others, but I think overall it has provided a convenience and an ease and accessibility. And again, in community versus government, one of the things that we have seen, and I saw this in community, when we provided access to an online platform or virtual access to even like intake forms and things like that, it really increased the number of people who participated, right? And so we're seeing that in the Department of Community Services too. So some of a lot of the employment support services that we offer have had some of the highest, participation rates in like 30 years of, some staff will say, I've been here for 30 years and I've never seen like participation rates like this through online platforms. And so I think that those are really telling stories, but also really validating that we're on the right track of, okay, how are we going to get these important programs and services out to people? And how do we support them in reaching the goals that they want to reach for their well-being and where they want to move in life?
Yeah, it's just a lot more tools in the toolbox.
Yeah, and we all need those tools in the toolbox, right?
Yeah. So let's talk a bit more about how technology and the internet is changing how the Department of Community Services achieves its priorities.
Yeah, so it really is transforming service delivery for the department. And I mentioned a little bit about employment support. So there are a lot of online tools now, both for employment and training through the department, which is really exciting because, again, that accessibility piece. So I know our employment supports and income assistance program in particular, there's a portal now where clients can go to access like resources. They can update their information in real time, so they don't have to go into an office and talk to somebody to get information updated. Even things like an address change, right? Like can be incredibly time consuming and can cause incredible disruption if you have mail or something coming to you, right? So and so they don't need to kind of visit that physical office always anymore. They can kind of keep in touch with the program or service or the support that they're looking for. So that's really been helpful. We also have been doing a lot of like virtual job training and workshops. So kind of learning those essential skills and accessing job support through online portals. And so those have been really, really helpful, and partnering with educational institutions to offer courses, right? That can happen online, from basic computer literacy to advanced technical skills. And these are all really crucial because, also learning this, like what I said before, like there is a learning curve to this digital world we find ourselves in, right? I mean, I don't think we'll ever stop learning there. So it's really important that as we progress with, technology, which is such a tool in our toolbox, having the knowledge to access those tools so that they can be fully utilized to benefit, people that we're trying to support is really critical. So I know one of the stories that we talked about recently at the department was just a success of a virtual job fair. So instead of having that typical job fair, it was kind of virtual online and workshops. And really what we're seeing is, again, those increased participation rates, that interactive component that maybe didn't exist when it was more in person. And again, you're breaking down those barriers of transportation and childcare and things like that. So those have been really helpful with the department. I
would imagine, and it kind of goes both ways, if you're trying to bring people together and provide information, digital platforms, just like this conference is a way to do that, where the time or distance doesn't come into play. But it can work in both directions. GEO Nova Scotia has 15 staff people now. Maybe half of them are, within distance of HRM. And we're able to hire people from all across the province because they engage in our work virtually. And it's given us a much broader talent pool to draw from, and some really wonderful people and some more experiences and perspectives.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that's wonderful. And, that's another example of what we see too at the Department of Community Services, right? So, we could have somebody who might be linked to the central office, but they work in Lunenburg, right? And so you have a broader talent pool, there's more opportunities, and it kind of breaks down those geographical barriers right around.
And some local knowledge too.
Of course, 100%. Nobody
in Lunenburg or in Sydney or in Amherst only wants to talk to people in Halifax about everything, believe it or not.
I know. Yeah, for sure.
That's
right?
Great.
It gives that localized lens, and brings another whole perspective too, I think, to just the work at hand, right?
Yeah. Those of us who are trying to build diverse workspaces, right, with different perspectives, experiences, really are benefiting from online.
And I think, too, another thing, when I think about the department, just the enhanced accessibility, too, even for persons with disabilities. So things that are online, making sure that they're, reader-friendly, screen reader-friendly, plain language. Like, those are all conversations, and really a lot of work goes into try to make sure that what is uploaded and what is digital is accessible, and and easy for people to navigate, right? And we know that government websites are not always easy, but we certainly do, there's an increased focus and effort certainly around a lot of the programs and services that are offered at Department of Community Services to make sure that information is in plain language and easy accessible. And a lot of that work is happening too within the disability work that's happening and sharing information with community and accessible formats. It's been really important.
It is a great point. We heard from Minister LeBlanc this morning about the Department of Cybersecurity and Digital Solutions and how they just live and breathe that culture of, creating digital spaces that really work for everybody.
Yeah.
I think the first iteration, my experience anyway, of the government being online is to take those awful forms that they had and just literally digitize them, and now you've got an awful digital experience instead of an awful in-person experience. And what you're talking about with DCS and, to have a province with the foresight to start up a department like that, I think there's only a few of them in the whole country, but to really kind of take the digital culture and what we've learned over the last few years about how to make digital space welcoming and accessible for everybody is a big part of the success that we're going to have.
Yeah, and I also too, I want to give a little nod to accessibility legislation too, right? Like when we're looking at that kind of information and communication standards around, how do we make information accessible for all citizens, right? And so I think that's something that Nova Scotia is leading in around accessibility, and it is kind of not really the trickle-down effect, but I think it's being really embraced and should be embraced by government around how do we make information and communication accessible for all citizens, right? Regardless of, age, stage, knowledge, and I think, a lot of that feeds into some of the digital strategies too that we're seeing across lots of government departments, and certainly, community services is looking at internally as well around how do we use technology different, and even how you update, right, old case management systems, for example. Sure.
Yeah. What I really am pleased with too is how, as much as we're playing a little bit of catch up, our advancements to put things online are not too far ahead of our efforts to make sure everyone can access it, where oftentimes that might have been the afterthought. We build it, and isn't it great? And then eventually someone knocks on the door and says, hey, this actually doesn't work for a whole chunk of people, and then there's a bit of a scramble or a bit of afterthought. And this feels, our movement towards an accessible province, our movement towards digital inclusion are really kind of allowing those to move together.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think, we still have a ways to go, but I think it's very encouraging to see kind of some of the efforts that are kind of coming into play. And, we know that rural Nova Scotia still has, some just broadband issues, right? And there's so many layers to being able to get access to some of that, but everything is in progress, and I think there's a real commitment to continue down this kind of digital strategy and accessibility journey, which is exciting.
Yeah. There are many steps, right? The infrastructure has to be there.
That's right.
Then you have to have the devices and the technology,
Yeah.
and then you also have to have the skills, and then you have to have something that's worth going to and using those skills to apply.
Yeah.
So there is a lot going on. That's
is.
really why it's such a multi-sector and multi-layered kind of challenge for us.
Yeah.
But it also provides opportunities up and down and across those sectors as well for us to take advantage of. Let's talk a bit more about disability. So the remedy, as it's been called, is a big deal.
It is.
Big deal. It's going to change the face of living with disabilities in the province. I'm sure it's already started, but there's a lot of energy, resources, excitement. So how do you see digital and disability supports moving forward in the future?
Yeah, so I mean, a big part of the remedy, and this is very public. Like when we talked about like making sure information is accessible, a remedy has been really driving that within the department, and there's a whole website that people can access information to learn more about the remedy, and I think that's a really critical part so that everyone can come on the journey together. But a big part of the remedy is individualized funding, and so as we move to that individualized funding, people will need to be able to manage that individualized funding, and digital technology plays a big role in that, right? For all kinds of reasons, accessibility, ease, like, you don't want to make this difficult for folks who are trying to, access support and services. So, as a province, as we move towards individualized funding, there'll be a big digital component to that around how people can upload their information, how they manage their individualized funding, and all of that work is happening right now, and it's a huge lift. It's working with companies that are going to be supporting the backbone to that. It's making sure that all the systems speak to each other. It's ensuring that the front-facing interface for persons with disability who will be using this technology, it's easy to navigate, or even if they have some support in navigating it, that it's not going to be cumbersome. So it's going to play a significant role. It's exciting, but it's a big lift, right? But an exciting one.
It will be. Building online systems, especially that deal with money, but of any scale, is very, very complicated stuff.
Yeah.
Our bank just redid their website. Anyway, if you use the same bank as me, you know what I'm talking about. It's a disaster. Anyway.
Well, and we don't want money going missing, right? So one missed payment or check for somebody, can be quite challenging. So it's making sure that things are flowing smoothly and there's as little hiccups as possible. So that's
absolutely.
the end goal. But it is really, it's a forward-thinking way to move. It's innovative. It's going to make people's lives so much easier. At least that's the hope and the intent. It'll be really exciting I think it's going to really transform just how we do business and support and services just in general.
Absolutely. Not only for the lives of the individuals involved, their families and their support systems.
Oh,
the
100%.
world's going to change. The community will feel different.
Yeah. And, the care coordinators, the social workers at community services, they are incredibly busy, right? They want to support as many individuals and families as they can. And I think one of the things that, this technology will do, and technology as the department continues to emerge and go down this pathway of modernization and changing the way they do business, is it'll allow that to be so much easier, right? And allow, social workers to reach more individuals and families and support them, and allow more autonomy and independence of the people who are accessing that support and service. So it's a win-win.
Oh, absolutely. Mm-hmm. If there's one consistent challenge that whether it's a caseworker or a social worker or someone, bumps up against, is I can't reach the person I'm trying to support.
Yeah.
I need to call them. I need them to call me. And how can we do that? So I know that the department over the last number of years has took advantage, I think, of some early pandemic money and got a bunch of phones. And actually, as people are being moved out into community or being supported, those phones got distributed. I think there was somewhere north of 900 of them, which is a really great investment from the department.
Yeah.
And the remedy also involves, getting those big facilities closed, getting people out into community, and that's going to have even more need to stay connected.
Yeah, so, I was in community when that happened, right, because the pandemic was happening, and, that was a transformative moment. We call those kind of historic moments in community. So those phones, right, reduced isolation, created opportunities for safety and security that never really existed in that community before, in the communities in which they were going out and reaching. And so it was a real game changer for so many people. It was a real celebration that the department kind of started to move in this way from the community's perspective. And as they continue to move in that way and access, phones, internet, looking at laptops, perhaps for citizens who might not have been able to have access to that before, that has been transformational.
Yeah, it's been great. And, we talk about some silver linings from the pandemic. The investments that followed those early days to allow for this sort of work gave us the experience. So now we're a few years in, we've seen, your caseworkers have felt firsthand what it's like when that person does get a device. We're not going back. It's just, right, it's been so excellent.
Well, and that's the data, the evaluation, right? That first voice, those stories, right? The success stories of what it's done, right? people attaching finally to employment. They might have been trying for 5 or 6 years, and now, they can get that call from a prospective employer because they have a phone. Like, that's huge, right? If you don't have access to that, and you don't always have, you might have housing, but you might not have a phone, right? And so how are you supposed to get a job if you don't have
Everyone
access to a
expects
phone?
you to have a mobile phone. Everyone wants to text you.
Yeah.
Heck, half the important stuff you do online requires a two-factor authentication, which says what's your mobile number.
I really don't like two-factor authentication. I'm just going to say that right now. It's still a thorn in my side.
Yeah.
But I totally understand and respect the fact that we need to have it.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great security tool, but again,
It is.
It only works if people
I know.
people have what they need.
That's right.
So in the last year, DCS has put a couple of big things online
Yes.
of kind of the more traditional work. So one of them was back in November, the beginnings of the DCS account online reporting service.
Mm-hmm.
So people in ESIA and DSP who need to report monthly basis, they were literally had to go to somewhere and drop
Yeah.
off a piece of paper every month
Yeah.
just to keep going. This is a really big deal. How's it going?
Yeah, it's going really, really well. And we're getting a lot of positive feedback that, it is really taken the stress off of folks who are trying to get into that office. And it goes back to what we talked about earlier. There's transportation barriers, childcare, right? No one wants to, drag a toddler, right? Always on a bus or walking
And
for a distance.
time.
And
Right?
time.
Like we often talk about the cost of internet or the cost of a device, but the
Yeah.
cost of not having it is a heck of a lot of time that nobody has.
Yeah.
We work with people, you've worked with people, and if they want to pay a bill today, they're standing on the street for a bus, and then they're taking a bus to a bank, and then they're
Yeah.
standing in line at a bank, and they're paying a bill, and then reversing that whole
Yeah.
process. We could do our banking on our phone right now while we're talking.
That's right.
So how do we even account for the cost that
Yeah.
we're saving people by allowing them to be online?
And it goes back to saving, the citizens that we're supporting time, saving those caseworkers time.
The caregivers as well.
And the
ones who would be
caregivers'
doing it. Yeah.
time. And, time is valuable.
Very valuable.
Yeah.
So the other system that I think is just starting to get piloted in August, this is the ESIA intake online form.
Yes, yeah.
So what can you tell us about that?
So that's still under development. Really trying again to make processes a little bit more easy for folks. Break down some of the stigma too of coming into an office sometimes, which is really important. So that's going well. I mean, I think one of the things that as ESIA kind of moves down this road, all of the programs that are offered at community services, it's looking at what are those synergies and how do we create even a more seamless, integrated? I think technology has really provided and opened up opportunities for us to not, someone who accesses programs and services at ESIA, right, Employment Support and Income Assistance, there might be some connect there to child and family well-being programming or disability support programming. And so I think the other thing that digitizing and moving forward with a lot of this work is allowing more integrated, seamless movement between all of the programs that are offered at community services. And that, again, not just from a time saver, but just from an ease of having somebody not have to tell their story all over again or say, well, I accessed this in the Child and Family Wellbeing Program, and so do I need to add that in, tell the story again when you're now accessing a different service in a program that's still within community services. So creating that more seamless, integrated support, how people move through services more seamlessly. So I think this helps with all of that, right?
Yeah, it really also feels just like another example of giving people the opportunity to provide the information you need,
Yeah.
but to do it with a little bit more dignity
Yep.
and very much on their own time, right? I mean, if you have internet at home, your computer, it means that if I'm up at 3 in the morning, if I can squeeze a few minutes between dropping the kid off for school and making their lunch or whatever,
Yeah.
then I can do it then, which is so much better than
Yeah.
having to go at a certain time to a certain place, block off all this,
Right.
and hope that it works out.
And I mean, your point is so well taken too, right? We all don't live our support lives 8:30 to 4:30, right? It could be 10 o'clock at night. It could be midnight after a busy day of putting children to bed. And also, too, a lot of people might need support to fill out forms, and that person may not always be available as well. So I think this just provides such a better level of opportunity for people to get access to the support and services that they need, kind of in a way that works for them.
Yeah, great. Well, listen, I want to tell you now about a couple of pilots that we ran with community services with GEO Nova Scotia. So this is, we support thousands of individuals through 100 referral partners. Most of them are nonprofit organizations like Autism Nova Scotia that helps us identify people who need our supports. But we ran a couple of small, we'll call them micro-pilots, to be really modest. But what we wanted to do is work with DCS to target individual scenarios to see how digital inclusion would change them. And one of them was individuals with high medical transportation costs.
Yeah.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but you're on income assistance, you've got a medical need for medical appointments, they might be very regular, and you're in that semi-rural area. Right now, the province is footing the bill for probably like an Accessibus to go and pick you up, spend an hour on a bumpy road to get your appointment, paying to take you back. Could be hundreds of dollars a month for a person just to get to a few appointments that they could be doing online.
Yeah.
So suddenly that monthly cost plummets, and not only can they access appointments virtually, but they can access everything else virtually too.
Yeah.
Felt like a really big success. The other one I'd like you to reflect on is youth in care and youth leaving care. This is a big concern for the department as well. I believe it's a real of interest to the minister and to others to really kind of do a lot more to support individuals who were in care of the province and are trying to transition out of that.
Yeah. So the medical thing is huge. I think, what you're talking about, that whole process of getting to a medical appointment is exhausting for a lot of folks. And so I think that's another great example of digital inclusion and not having to undergo the stress of, how am I going to get there? How am I going to get back? What if the bus is not here? What if it's late? Am I going to miss my appointment? Are they still going to fit me in? So it can take a mental health toll on folks too, in addition to some of the physical piece. So, youth leaving care, this is a big one, right? Right now the department has a PATH program. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. So it's kind of opening up opportunities for youth leaving care to continue receiving support, right, and pursuing education like up to the age of 25. And so a lot of work is being done, in that space right now, and really important work, right, to ensure that opportunities are provided to youth leaving care of the minister. Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. It's really exciting work. I know I think we all know one of the other obsessions of the province, of the government, and of the department in particular is housing and homelessness. There's been a lot of investments, a lot of effort. We've been in some of those spaces with some of the pallet shelters. What can you tell us about how DCS is incorporating digital inclusion into supporting people who are struggling with their housing situation?
Yeah, so, when you think of digital inclusion, right, you probably think of, like you said, it's almost like people just expect, right, you to have access to, digital devices and be able to connect with the world around you. And I think oftentimes, when you think of like sheltered villages and tiny homes, these are citizens that have maybe not have had access to that. And that really does impact their well-being, right? And access to potential economic security, which really are kind of that core foundation components of what the department is supporting, right? And so, through GEO Nova Scotia, we've been able to get access to free cell phones and laptops and internet, like for many of these shelter villages and tiny homes, and it's been a game changer, right? And so it goes back to some of those basic principles we talked about before, breaking down that isolation, that kind of safety and security piece, but more than that, even just access to, medical or mental health supports, or, many folks are trying to get back on their feet and attach to employment, and you can't, if you're in a shelter village and you don't have a phone, how are you going to connect with a job that you're trying to secure if no one can reach you, right? And so it really has been a significant game changer as people are kind of moving through kind of what their next step goals are, as in this kind of space of digital inclusion. And I think it really speaks to the kind of, inclusion for all, right? So when we're talking about digital inclusion, we're really proud of that work and really value the partnership with GEO Nova Scotia to ensure that digital inclusion includes those shelter villages and tiny homes too.
Yeah, well, one of the things I really love about the pallet shelters, and I don't think you get enough credit for it as a department, is that what you're not doing is putting a roof over someone's head and saying, that problem is solved, and then walking away. They are such a supportive environment. The wraparound supports for the individuals there. As you say, they have internet access there. They'll have devices that they can use there. And, the organizations that you're partnering with to support and run those are just incredible. The Ally Center of Cape Breton, New Dawn. I mean, they're just all the credit to them. And they're so eager to take the training as well. So they, like we heard earlier, so they have those skills. The whole community itself, we see supporting each other with their digital skills kind of together.
Yeah, I mean, I really want to give a lot of credit to those service providers who go above and beyond, and it is kind of a shared learning environment together, and I think that is what makes it also very successful. And I think ensuring that folks who are living in the shelter villages and in the tiny homes and working with those service providers, like including I think technology and digital inclusion in that to help them achieve some of the goals they're trying to achieve, and just for their overall health and well-being. Connecting with a family or friend they haven't been able to connect with in a while, right? And I think it's for medical reasons, social reasons, economic employment reasons. Like, there are so many reasons why it's such a benefit to have this included in that support service. So and I agree wholeheartedly. Our service providers are outstanding.
Outstanding, yeah. That's certainly been our experience. Many folks will come to us for digital inclusion supports, be referred to us, and there's a particular need in that moment, and it might be an education need or an employment need or something like that. But once they achieve digital inclusion, it's a 360-degree impact, right? And not just for them, it can be for their family members as well. It's just incredible how it can unlock possibilities for people.
Well, it opens up the world again, right?
Does.
And I think, that's for some, maybe they felt, that wasn't ever a possibility. And so it's that whole how everyone kind of moves forward and moves where they need to go.
Yeah. And, I also don't think that we can effectively put a price or a value on that social connection. We talk about mental health and mental wellness, and whether it's clinicians or programs, and there's a lot of investment of us systemically to try to support people, and it never seems like it's going to be enough. But ultimately, for a lot of people, what's missing isn't, I don't have enough time with a clinician, it's I don't have enough connection with just other people, and there's no number of clinicians who are going to change that for them. It's this connectivity.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying around the social connection is so important, right? And I think we you're right. There are never going to be enough clinicians probably in the province. Well, maybe we'll see. But I think that social connection and breaking down that isolation, building that sense of community. So building communities we can't underestimate the power of strong, inclusive communities, right? And when you have those social connections, those networks, that builds a level of resilience, right? That really contributes to someone's overall health and well-being, whether that's, psychological health, physical health, right? It's so critical, right? And, for those who need a little bit more than that, yes, the clinicians will be there. Those allied health supports are also incredibly critical. But I agree wholeheartedly that, having that social connection, and, sometimes it is just a matter of having a phone to make those social connections, right? And those reach outs for a variety of reasons, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's turn our attention back to employment a little bit. I know we touched on it before. Here's a statistic for you. In 2022, according to the research, over 26% of Nova Scotians who are employed spent at least half of their job online, working from home. And about half of them, 100% of their job was online from home. So what we noticed too in this survey, as the Canadian Internet Use Survey, for those data geeks at home, They didn't even ask these questions a few years ago.
Yeah.
That's how quickly this has changed. And so, let's go back to the employment support programs that we've worked on together. Digital Solutions is the big one with our friends Solutions Learning Center, another service provider in a different field, but also really incredible work that they do. And they took their employment readiness program that they used to bring a handful of people into a room for, and they took it online. And then they took it on the road. And we went up to Amherst, and that was the first one. They had almost 30 people.
Yeah.
The quote that you had is one of mine as well. A senior member of the department said, I've never seen this many people sign up for a program before. And then we took it to Digby, and it did great. We went up to Cape Breton. It was, in Cape Breton, the 30 or so people that got together and worked with Solutions Learning and spent time together, every week for weeks, they had such a good time together that they kept meeting together after the program was over. Talking about building community, it's amazing.
Yeah, well, I think that goes back to what we just talked about, right? So that sense of community, building those connections and networks, right? And how you access those networks even after a point in time in which you build them, right? It kind of creates and supports the resiliency and also the skillings, building new skills, right? And continuing to build new skills, that lifelong learning piece too, right? So, we're seeing that as well, right? So, Nova Scotia works online, right? People are signing up. They're, as we mentioned before, there's high enrollment rates, right? From right across the province, where before you might have a concentrated effort just in one particular city. And if you lived in Yarmouth and there wasn't anything happening in person in your local community, you might have been out of luck, right?
That's right.
Where now, with technology, digital inclusion, it makes a huge difference. The other thing too is the department's been working with employers and training institutes and things like that. So, creating credentials online so it's easier for individuals to access when they have to produce them. So whether it's a first aid certificate that's now digital or other certificates and based on as they're completing, that's been a huge game changer too. How many times have you gone looking for something that's been paper and you can't find it and, you have to produce something and it's holding up part of the process of trying to apply for a job. So I think those are all pieces that have been improved upon.
Yeah, absolutely. And after the lunch break, we'll be talking to Minister Balzer from the Department of Labor, or from Labor and Advanced Employment. Listen to me, I'm using the old term.
Labor skills and immigration. Yes.
And there's a lot of overlap between some of the work that you're doing, especially in that leading edge around employment. And them.
And that's great. That goes back to that, how do we get that seamless, integrated approach for citizens, right? Accessing the employment support services, whether that's through community services or through labor skills and immigration, and how do we create more synergy so people don't have to fill out the same intake forms, tell their stories again. And I think digital inclusion is really on the right track for supporting all of that, and working across departments, right? So I think one of the things that it has done is allowed even government departments to work more seamlessly together, right? And that's always good news.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. And there is that whole spectrum of learning, right? We're definitely, in cahoots with Schools Plus and looking at students and their needs. And of course, with LSI and the community learning organizations, adult learning and their needs and the employment pieces that go along. It all is interconnected. So speaking of youth, I want to tell you one of the stories that we had. I'm going to tell you a couple of stories and just let you reflect on them. And I'm looking over at Carrie. You've got a couple of questions. Do you have a door prize winner for us yet? Okay. Well, as soon as we get it, I'll let you know. A few years ago, Cynthia, I got a call from someone at Schools Plus over in Halifax. They were working with the DCS caseworker, and the single mother and the student has autism, was autistic and nonverbal. And at school, they had an iPad. And the iPad has a very special program on it. You would know about it. I think Prolo Quota Go is the big sell. $350 a pop for the license, by the way, even after you get the device. So, unsurprisingly, this mother and this family did not have that kind of the money needed to have the technology at home. And yet, the kid goes to school and gets the technology and begins to develop communication skills and then loses it again when they go home. And I got this call and they said, I know you're only doing Chromebooks, but is there anything you can do here? And I said, well, why not? And so we went and bought our first iPad and case, and actually I think it was a local Kiwanis paid for the software at that point, and we rushed it over and got that student set up. Since then, we've set up a separate stream of referrals for that exact reason, where our Schools Plus coordinators and others who work with students can request the iPad, the durable carrying case, the app that they need to make sure you have that seamless experience as well from at home or at school.
Yeah, so I mean, I love hearing those kinds of stories around those success stories, I call them. You know, they start out as not great news stories, you know, and what you're talking about is that transference of skills, right? So we all talk about how do we learn, how do we continue to build our skills, and if you only have access to build your skills one part of your day, and then you're going home and living another part of your day, and you can't continue that learning and that knowledge, it can certainly hamper, right, kind of where you're trying to go in the long term. So, you know, that's such a great story, and I think such a huge need. That's a perfect example of a need that a lot of families just would not have the disposable income to be able to access that, but yet recognizing it's such an important need for their child and their future. And being able to kind of bridge that. And that speaks to so many things, right? A need of a family, how that community, right, in this case, GEO Nova Scotia came together to help bridge that. You know, you pulled in funding from a Lions Club, which is another well-known community support agency, and together as a community, that need for that child and that family was fulfilled, right? And so I'm sure the peace of mind that came, you know, to that mom, that single mom, was tremendous, and so much gratitude for sure. And the fact to hear that GEO then started kind of this other stream, so, you know, you also saw the gap, right, in the digital inclusion space around what else can we do to ensure that there is access for all, and I think that's a great example. So kudos to GEO Nova Scotia, but I know that single parent was probably incredibly happy.
Yeah. Well, and they did start a ball rolling downhill. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, we have the easiest job. We just take the money you give us and buy stuff for people who need it, and we rely so much on our partners, in this case Schools Plus. So again, another example of departments working together. DCS is supporting this need,
Yeah.
Schools Plus is identifying the need,
Yeah.
and we're just trying to be there to fill the gap with you.
You know, I see the department as working, you know, in collaboration with community, right? And community and individuals and families, right? There's no one, you know, they say it takes a village. I call it an ecosystem sometimes, right? So strong community partners, strong relationships, really that's how you advance, right? The goals that we're trying to achieve around wellness and social security for individuals and families in the province. And so, you know, I love to hear those stories. I think that's really, you know, the goals that we're trying really aligns nicely with what we're trying to achieve. And the good news stories are so great, because we always hear the bad news stories, right?
It's
both
true.
in community and in the public sector and government. But it's the good news stories. We need to take that time to celebrate it, and then look at, like, okay, you know, what is working well, and how do we, you know, get that out there even more, right?
Yeah. What I wish I could do, I wish I had a crystal ball that could show me the ripple effects of this, right? That one family alone,
Yeah.
getting that type of technology to change their life. What different course are they now on in
Yeah.
1 year's time, in 5 years' time, when that
Yeah.
young person is an adult? You know, how much different is their life going to be because they had those we all know, you know, the early years can be the most important.
Oh,
and
100%.
making sure people have what they need.
And I think communication is so key for so many things, right? You know, in this example that you're talking about, you know, being able to communicate your needs, right, even to your own mother, or a parent or a caregiver, is so critically important, right? And if you're not able to communicate your needs, right, if you're only able to communicate them half of a day, and you can't really communicate them, you know, the second half of the day, there's so many other things that can arise as a result of that.
Yeah,
right?
that seems like it'd just be a terribly frustrating
Yeah,
situation
so
to be in.
frustrating for the individual.
I also
yeah.
felt, you know, very much for those parents in those situations, wherever they are, where they see the need. They know their kid has this need,
Yeah.
and yet they can't meet that need.
Yeah.
And that's just got to be about the toughest thing for a parent
Well,
to face.
kudos to GEO Nova Scotia.
Well, thank you. No, thank you for all the support. Okay, here's one more quote. I'm going to read you a quote from our friends at Shelter Nova Scotia.
Okay, yeah.
Because they were providing a couple of stories. And they said, because of this work, one of our tenants was able to connect with employment and education services independently from the comfort of his home. The tenant is now successfully taking courses online and attending a work placement in conjunction with his online learning. Another one of our tenants had a healthcare provider that's based outside of Halifax. Unfortunately, the tenant had been faced with multiple barriers to being able to access their provider. Getting the Chromebook through GEO has allowed the tenant to have video calls with their provider and breaking down barriers.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? I mean, it really speaks to what we talked about, right? So like accessing employment, being able to do that, have your autonomy to be able to do that, right? It's very difficult. Situations are so complex, right? Now you find yourself living in a shelter or shelter village, or your housing is precarious for whatever reason, but you still can have that dignity, access, employment, reach the goals that you want to reach, and the example of a healthcare provider that might be outside of town, right? We live in a digital world now, right? So when people build relationships with trusted clinicians or a provider, right, you want to maintain those. And just because you've been displaced or you're living in a different town or city, to be able to kind of keep that connection is such a huge part of your health and well-being, right? And so being able to do that is so important.
Yeah. Having that attachment to a care provider is so precious.
Oh,
The
gosh.
thought of losing it or losing that connection because of distance, or a change in your...
And it goes back to, how would you get to like Truro from Halifax, right? If you didn't have the means to be able to do that, right? And it goes back to the safety piece and accessibility. So yeah, these are all great stories, and I think kind of speak for themselves around the, certainly what we're talking about today and how the department is really embracing the partnership with GEO, but also like the digital inclusion space, both internally within the department to make it more seamless and ensure that it's accessible for clients who are accessing it and making it easy, and then also how transformative it is for the citizens that are accessing the support and services through community services. Yeah.
It really is. Yeah, we've been using the word transformation and transformative a lot today because I think it's just about the only word that fits. When we started GEO Nova Scotia, so we got some help from some folks, and they said, you need a tagline. You need a, right? Oh, we don't know what's going to be. And then it took us about 6 or 8 months, and that line, transforming lives through digital inclusion, it came from the communities we were serving.
Yeah.
It was a reflection of what was happening. Every single time somebody got connected that wasn't, their life transformed.
Well, those are the best taglines, right? They come from community, right? Those are your first voices, right?
It was
Those
no
are the lived
marketing expert
experience.
for the record,
well,
anyway. So we have 6 minutes left.
Okay.
Carrie, you can't see Carrie, but Carrie's my off-camera support person. Carrie, do we have a door prize winner yet? We do. Excellent. Why don't you tell us who they are? You sent me the message. All right. This is the power of technology. I'm going to tell you. Get ready, everyone. One of you is an exciting winner. The door prize winner for this session is Jen Hogue, H-O-E-G. Jen, congratulations. You've just won a $250 gift card to Orchard, Canada's largest refurbisher of mobile devices, and one of our suppliers. They're a great partner. You're going to love them. Congratulations, Jen. Now, Carrie, we'd like your help with some questions. We're going to run out the clock fielding questions from the viewers.
There are 3 questions. The first one is, how is DCS assisting low-income people on income assistance who can't even afford food to get access? How is DCS helping people who can't afford food get access to the internet and information technology?
So what I would say there is there are lots of ways to access information online. So local libraries, if you're not able to get access, certainly give your caseworker a call to see what kind of technology you're needing access to, and I think that, this is an ever-evolving area of growth and support. And we certainly, always try to do the best with the resources and support that we have. Yeah.
Yeah. Certainly, we've seen the cost pressures are
There's
a real
a lot
challenge.
of cost pressures.
And digital costs have been one of those. Not only has the cost gone up, but it's gone up the priority list for people. Right? I've got to pay my rent first because I need a place to live.
Yeah.
Second to that, groceries. Yeah, I need the food, but there's other
100%.
places people will do without food, or they'll eat less food, or they'll go to a food bank. But if you don't have, so people are paying their internet bills now instead of the prescription or the groceries or the clothes. It's a difficult situation to be in. But as you said, it's a work in progress.
It is a work in progress.
And we're doing better than we did before.
We are doing better, but again, we talked about this too, right? There's still ways to go. Definitely something that needs to continue to be a goal, a stretch goal.
Great. Carrie.
The next question is, as we digitize services, is literacy and accessibility for those with vision accommodations, for example, part of DCS's and the province's investment into digital inclusion?
Yes, yeah. So one of the things that's definitely a priority for DCS is, ensuring that as things are going online, they're screen reader friendly and accessible for persons with disabilities. So I think that's, and that also goes back to the accessibility legislation piece, right? So making sure that we're in line with those standards. So.
Yeah, and I think Carrie's the question that Carrie shared brought up the point not just around maybe screen reading and disabilities, but also just straight up literacy. I remember in a previous job where it was a concern of mine in a word processor, right? Like in Microsoft Word, you can put in some text and it will give you a kind of a score about what the reading level is, what grade level you would need to be able to comprehend this. And we would take swaths of government documents, the kind where people who are struggling needed to fill them out, and we'd put them in this thing, and it would say, you need a grade 13 or 14 education, like post-high school. Well, so this is another opportunity as we're moving things online to bring plain language into place, to really make things accessible to those of us who can't read at a university level.
Well, and I think it goes back to like the remedy work, right? So a lot of talk around the remedy, and we're hearing directly from the disability community on this too, and rightfully so, right? Just around using plain language. And so there are numerous, like all of the documents within the remedy, right? That they have a plain language kind of version to them, and that's so critically important because this is about citizens with disabilities in our province and how the system is transforming, and people need to understand, how that involves them, and they need to be able to participate in that.
Absolutely. Okay, Carrie, do you think we can squeeze in one more?
We have 1 minute.
All right, let's do it.
So one person asked about who DCS partners with for the career fairs and skills workshops. This person works for Nova Scotia Works and would love to partner in Inverness and Richmond counties.
Yeah, so what I would say is, reach out to our Employment Services Division at Community Services, and I know we do some partnerships with Nova Scotia Works, just because, again, our close connection with labor skills and immigration. So we'd love to hear from them, and I think collaboration, I'm a very big believer in collaboration and partnership. I come from community, and I have kind of carried that passion and value kind of into government. So yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Carrie, for the questions and for the people who sent them in. That is all the time we have for this session today. I'd like to thank again our special guest one more time, Cynthia Carroll. Thank you so much for jumping in at the last minute. You did wonderfully.
Again, it was wonderful to be here.
Oh, no, thank you. So thanks to all of you watching at home. We're glad you made this time as well for us. We hope you enjoyed the session. Please enjoy the rest of the forum, and don't forget to tune in tonight at 7 p.m. for the Nova Scotia Digital Inclusion Awards, celebrating incredible progress we're making together and highlighting some of the people and organizations who are making it happen.